Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time. Brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center Network with support from K-12 and Fuel Education and in partnership with Clemson Broadcast Productions.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, brought to you by K-12 and Fuel Education. We're pleased at the National Dropout Prevention Center at Clemson University to bring you Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. These shows highlight practitioners and strategies and interventions and programs and approaches to improve graduation rates. And so we're very pleased that you're joining us today. At the National Dropout Prevention Center, we exist to provide services and resources and tools to people who do the work, to the tens of thousands of practitioners across the country who are struggling and working daily to improve our nation's graduation rates and help our youth to graduate and be successful. So we welcome you, and we're very pleased that you're joining us today. We have a lot of resources at the National Dropout Prevention Center. We have a lot of things going on. Today, we're actually here in Orlando, Florida at the Reaching the Wounded Student Conference and the Freshman Success Conference. And we have hundreds of educators and practitioners here who have joined us to learn more about how to do this important work. We encourage you to look at our other resources, our conferences, events. We have our next conference coming up in Palm Springs, California, the National Dropout Prevention Conference, our largest conference of the year in Palm Springs, October 23rd through 25th. So we encourage you to review our website. Just Google Dropout Prevention. It's the first hit, or go to www.dropoutprevention.org and share our resources. I'm very pleased to have with me today Dr. Mark Wilson. Dr. Wilson is an esteemed educator in his own right, and he's also a consultant with the National Dropout Prevention Center at Clemson, and we're very pleased with that. Mark, our topic today is a coalition of caring, developing a trauma-sensitive culture in an urban setting. Mark, introduce our presenter.
Before I do that, Dr. Addis, I would like to remind all our listeners that this program is going to be archived on the website, and we'll have additional resources and options for everybody to continue the conversation. And you can do so in a number of ways. First, there's a discussion board at the bottom of the webcast page. Then on Twitter, look us up at NDPCN, that's National Dropout Prevention Center Network, NDPCN, a hashtag of solutions. Check us out on our Facebook page. There's a banner on the website. You can look at it. Or if you don't like to do any of those things, email us, call us. I guess you could send us a letter if you wanted to, but we hope we can get interaction going on, and I think we will, Dr. Addis, because today's guest is somebody to listen to and somebody to learn from. Today with us we have Tim Nolan, and Tim is in his 51st year of education, and so check that out. He's retired from both the University of Cincinnati and Cincinnati State. Now, he worked there on a team that founded the two-year college.
That's
actually.
correct.
And he served as the Director of Professional Development for the National Association of Tech Prep Leadership, and he's coordinated two major conventions for the group. So here's something very interesting, is after teaching for 36 years, he could have gone home, but instead of that, he is still working, and he is a consultant in career and technical education for the Cincinnati Public Schools and working with high schools that work. And so he has a group of schools in Southwest Ohio that he serves, and his work there is really exciting. I do want to mention, though, he's, in addition to being a great educator, he's just a wonderful human being. He and his wife, Peg, they have been foster parents for over 22 years, and they have cared for over 60 children awaiting. And so with a heart and a head for learning and for kids, let's learn a lot from Tim Nolan. Tim?
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here today. And in regard to the foster care, my wife is really the incredible person. She's a saint, I'm the martyr, so it worked out really well, okay? But most infants and toddlers awaiting emergency placed in our homes, and we are honored to be there. And our 30-year-old daughter is one of those children that we actually adopted, so we are very honored to serve and having her find her way. But today what we'd like to focus upon is the work that High Schools at Work, which is part of the SREB, Southern Regional Education Board. I'm hired as a consultant to work with schools, and I'm so honored to work with Cincinnati Public Schools because I've worked with them over the years. I'm a consultant there as well in career technical education, has helped design many of their curricula for their career tech programs. But one of the things that really has bothered me is the whole thing about the children and the needs of the children as our communities are changing. So what I'd like to do is get into the story of Western Hills High School and the Coalition of Caring that we have organized. We are certainly not experts, but we are on a journey. And in our journey, we are learning so many things. And so today, I'd really like to share with the people on the webinar and people that are interested, just our journey, what we've done, what we've learned, and especially give you resources and all of the different kinds of things that we have discovered as we have continued this journey, okay? So, to begin with, Western Hills High School is one of the 16 public schools in the Cincinnati Public School District that has about 36,000 students throughout the district. This Western Hills High School, if you knew Andy Williams or Doris Kappelhoff, who was Doris Day, they are graduates of Western Hills High School, okay, back in the day. But right now, that whole community is going through a major transition over the last 3 to 5 years. And the whole gentrification process in downtown Cincinnati has changed the western side of the city to a really kind of disadvantaged neighborhoods, changing neighborhoods, and it has greatly impacted the school. So consequently, it is changing 100 times over. Cincinnati Public School also has the #1 rated high school in the whole state of Ohio with Walnut Hills High School. But it also has many schools that are really in need of trying to work with all of the kids, especially in Cincinnati. Here's the data that you can see on the screen from the baseline data that has caused us to come together to really rethink how the school works and how our community needs to respond to the particular needs of the children. As you can see from the data here, all of the different suspensions, offenses, and expulsions, it's been really a very difficult year. We had a veteran principal who was a tremendous servant leader who was so perplexed about the deterioration of the student population in terms of its discipline and needs. And I was hired as a coach to serve Western Hills High School and to assist the principal and the faculty to try to address their needs.
So you really have like a shirt with an S under that flower shirt that pop out to fix it all,
No, they
huh?
do the work. They do the work. I could never be a principal in an urban school, and I admire people who can be and are. And so it's my honor to just serve them. And anything that they want me to do, I try to do to the best of my ability.
So what does that look like? And how did you transform things?
Well, the background, I think, is so important too. As you'll notice here, and we'll get into that, Mark, the childhood poverty rate in Cincinnati, as you can see, has been incredibly increasing, almost dramatically. And as you can see, we are the 4th highest ranked, which is a sad statistic. We are the 4th city in the United States with children living in poverty. I mean, it's just tragic. 98% of our students are on free and reduced lunch, and that's typical in some of the other high schools within the district as well. But you can see the rates have increased to 47.2 as of most recently after the 2007 recession. You can see how it impacted the city and it's working. So what we have done with that discipline data and with the background of the community, and also the fact that we have lost some students to suicide, and one most tragically, an 8-year-old boy in an elementary school, which has caused the whole city to rethink what in the world is going on in our city, not necessarily a school. Our partnership came together. And the partners are an interesting group of caring people. First, the community resource officer from Western Hills High School, Angela, was and is the kind of coordinating emphasis behind this, because she has the pulse of the faculty and the students that she serves there. And we have this group of social service agencies, including high schools that work, but especially Children's Hospital Medical Center, the Marison Center for Safe and Healthy Children, and also the Lighthouse Foundation, which is an incredible resource for offering referrals and therapy and treatment, and another organization which we call MindPeace. And MindPeace is kind of the centralizing focus of this group. And they believe in a community of school-wide practices, then they lead to intervention, and finally treatment. And they have this network of incredible mental health agencies and partners throughout the whole city. And we couldn't do this work without the MindPeace group really spearheading us. So we all took a look at the sad data and also the situations, and we decided to come together to try to work with the faculty and the administration to really try to develop a culture of trauma sensitivity. So that's where our journey has begun, and we are a year in it, so we're not that far, but we are moving in that direction. Interim, and meanwhile, we are having a new principal start at the school, and that principal has assured us that this is valuable work and will continue to be the work. So we were afraid of that for a while, but that we've got total assurances, and I know this principal personally, and I'm sure that this will be the case. The Lighthouse is an incredible group of people, and they have offered, actually, according to, I want to be getting this right here, they had 164 referrals that this organization has offered for our students at Western Hills. They offered 4,639 hours of treatment. Wow. And one of their expertise areas, and by the way, this school is a 7 through 12 graded high school, so it's a junior high, senior high combo. Most of the schools in Cincinnati Public are grades 7 through 12. Mm-hmm. And 75% of the students in the, for their services are in the 7th and 8th grades. So they really have focused on a lot of the preteens and the children in those areas. But they also offer incredible amounts of workshops, especially for compassion fatigue, and they offer that for health professionals, mental health professionals, and of course our teachers. So we were really pleased to see that they are an active partner and they really believe in supporting our whole initiative. The other great resource is our Children's Hospital Medical Center, Marison's Center for Safe and Healthy Children. And this is their model. It's kind of interesting. Dr. Robert Shapiro, who is the key pediatrician at this center, has done major research on the whole thing about what we call them ACEs, which your audience knows as effective or adverse childhood effects. And the adverse childhood effects or experiences and how it impacts the brain is Dr. Shapiro's expertise. Excuse me. And he looks at how it changes toxic stress, how it changes the genes, how it shapes brain development. It even rewires the brain. He has actual research showing this. And of course, it affects the immune system. And as you know, most of the listeners probably know that it does shorten the lifespan of children by almost 20 years if they are still living in this toxic stress environment. So this is really tragic. You know, if we knew that something that was happening would be shortening the lives of people by 20 years, what in the world would we do? You know, people stop smoking, this is good. So how can we stop dealing with the toxic stress that these children live in and day out, okay? So these ACEs, or adverse childhood effects, we wanted to study. So what we did is we got the data. Now the data is amazing to us and rather sad, but the point is it's critical. We use the Data Resource Center for Child and Adolescent Health, and your readers and listeners can all go to this website, the actual Data Resource Center at childhealthdata.org. And I think it's housed in a database at Johns Hopkins University, but they can actually find out for themselves the actual data and statistics for their region, their city, their part of the state. And here, as you can see, is ours. Claremont County is a county to the east of Cincinnati. Butler and Warren are counties to the north of Cincinnati. Obviously, Kentucky is on the river, so the river runs through it, so a lot of data there too. But anyhow, as you can see, now this is just stats. So you got to make it come alive. You have to create a story. So Jody, who is one of the directors of the center here, and Jody Short is a tremendous professional, and she worked with the whole group, and she said, let's create a story. So our story is, instead of looking at the data and saying that there's 20,000 children in Cincinnati who are living with more than 2 adverse childhood effects, all right, more than 2. That's, just because you're in extreme poverty doesn't mean you're having adverse childhood effects. It doesn't help. Just because you're in a single parent home doesn't mean that you're suffering from adverse childhood effect. However, parent incarcerated, mental health issues, all sorts of different kinds of emotional upheavals at the house. 50% of the students in Cincinnati public schools in certain areas move each year. So a teacher will start with a class of 30-some kids and only have maybe 15 of the same kids by the end of the year. So all that transition, and we call that churn rate, is definitely a factor of how to contain classrooms, improve classrooms, and so forth. So here's what Jody suggested in our group set. We'll take this data and we'll make it a story. If you filled 841 school buses and put them bumper to bumper from Xavier University, which is in the center of our city, down along Interstate 71 or Victory Parkway, all the way to town, that's how many buses and that's how many children would be in those buses for 20,400 kids who are suffering more than 2 adverse childhood effects.
And that doesn't even include the others
Oh,
who
no.
are suffering 1.
Oh, yeah,
is-
1 or 2.
yeah.
This is 2 or more.
This is 2 or more.
Absolutely. So as you can see, that really, I think, brings home the issue. So you have to create your own story. Take the statistics, but make it something that people can visualize or something that they can actually think through and say, my goodness, what a traffic jam, but what is inside those buses? Who are these kids? It's really sad, okay? But I think it brings home the point. At the same time that our group's working, they are linked to this wonderful group at George Washington University. And at George Washington University, in the Milken Foundation, they have a group called Building Community Resilience, all right? This is their model. We know all models are wrong, but some are useful, all right? But this one, I think, is a very graphic visualization of some of the cause and effects and the environments in our community. And it lists some factors that are adverse childhood effects, but it also talks about the good work. So there are 5 cities in this compact, if you will, by the Milken Foundation. And we are looking at, and they have all sorts of toolkits and resources. So you can go to that website at George Washington University and you can actually see the Building Resilient Community materials that are offered. And this was very helpful to us. And Cincinnati is one of the cities, as is Portland, Oregon, Dallas, Texas, Washington, D.C., and Wilmington, Delaware. So these are the 5 cities that are participating in this network to really ensure or build resilient communities. And so we're very, very helpful. We're very fortunate to be part of that network. And so, and Dr. Shapiro from Children's is very much a part of that network, and we rely on his expertise as well. Okay? We also have a local group, and they're called Joining Forces for Trauma-Informed Care. And this group has accepted our team, the Western Hills team, as a local initiative in the overall issue that they are trying to address as they build the skills of trauma-informed care to all of these different kinds of agencies, whether it be health care and so forth. You know, a non-medical home is an incredible stressor for young children. And so consequently, Children's Hospital has a lot of data on that. So it's kind of important to link to your healthcare agencies and to your hospitals to see, are your children in your neighborhoods getting the medical care that they need to be healthy, productive citizens? Okay? So that's another group. So based on all this background, simply we formed a steering committee of these agencies that I just described, and we invited the faculty and staff, all the staff, to participate in one of these 4 committees. Obviously, suicide prevention, based on the sadness of losing some of our students to that tragedy. Restorative practices, we are really examining and looking at and interviewing different school districts around the country, like Fairfax, Virginia, who has really done some seminal work in this whole process, as opposed to punitive behaviors. We've also are looking at self-care, compassion fatigue for teachers, and of course the Lighthouse is providing us with relaxation techniques, yoga, helpful tips for teachers. And finally, training and awareness. Where do we need to go? What's happening? So those 4 committees are formed, and we're starting to work together to really address this issue. So how did we get the whole thing kicked off? Now remember, a workshop is just an event. It's not a process, you know? But on January the 13th of this year, we organized a full day of professional development for all the faculty and all the staff of Western Hills High School. And basically, this was the program. We want high school teachers, and I hope no one takes offense of this, but it's true. High school teachers tend to like their subject matter maybe more than they like their students sometimes, okay? I was a high school teacher, so don't attack, all right? Well, you can't attack anyhow, so you're out of luck. So, but seriously, you know, chemistry teachers loved chemistry. That's why they teach it, all right? Now, we don't expect them to be counselors or into the lives of their students, nor do a lot of people want to be. Fine. But the point is, when your students are coming with all sorts of issues and toxic stress, it may not be that you're not teaching chemistry. It may be that they just can't learn it because of all the variables that are happening to them. So we wanted to stress with the high school teachers the biology and science behind this whole trauma issue so that they could understand, oh, well, maybe this is why I have to spend 10 to 15 minutes of my class time with behavioral issues and not even be able to teach. Because the Western Hills faculty said that between 10 and 15 minutes of every class period is spent in behavioral management issues and not in anything related to teaching and learning. So, you know, there it is.
They were spending the time anyway.
Oh, yeah. They're losing actually a whole class period in the day when you add it all up. So Dr. Shapiro laid out the science and the whole thing about adverse childhood effects brilliantly in a 45-minute presentation. But before he started, we had a student in foster care who was a 3.86 ready to graduate senior, okay? A full ride to Berea College. And this student read a poem that he wrote. And I would like to read it to you, but I want to read one stanza that will be embedded in my mind forever. He talked about 4 kids that he knew in foster care and how, I mean, he's the personification of resilience, okay? But he was talking about 4 of his friends who perhaps were not resilient. And he said in one of his stanzas, he said, she was afraid to turn off the lights at night to illuminate the real darkness. And that hit me so hard. And I saw 155 faculty and staff members sitting out there listening to this student share his story and his struggle with that fact. So they gave him a standing ovation. And I think that set the tone. It was an incredible kickoff. And then Dr. Shapiro with the kind of like the right brain, left brain kind of thing. You know, here's the emotional message. And now here are the scientific data and the facts that you need to know as an informed classroom instructor in a high school that's suffering, okay? So it was a beautiful day. And then all the faculty and staff rotated through 3 different workshops, one on self-care, about, fatigue and compassion fatigue and relaxation techniques. Another on this whole thing about the ACEs looking at students and what would cause them to have these kind of behavioral issues. And then the other was on dealing with the trauma-informed care and how you can actually work in your classroom with these kind of things instead of just sending them to the office or writing them up. It's kind of an interest. And a lot of the teachers shared techniques that they use to deal with students who are having these issues. It was a great day. The evaluations were out of sight, but it was just the event. We had to follow up immediately then with the committees and the process, and that's what we've done. So it's been a journey. And of course, this reinforces the whole concept of the Joe Hendershot's work and his extensive work with the wounded students, because bottom line, it says, if we fail traumatized students, our schools will fail as well. I mean, duh. Here's how I interpret it. If your kitchen's on fire, you really should stop painting the bedroom.
Wow.
And I think that is a question of, hello, you can talk about your math scores dipping, you can talk about different kinds of things, but if there's a fire going on in your high school, in your home, you better stop, put it out, and then go back to dealing with whatever you have to deal with to meet your school report card and so on and so forth. It can happen simultaneously, but let's put first things first.
Tim, it sounds like professional development and faculty and educator awareness is a big part of what you're doing.
This is what I do totally. I have done this across the country in 39 states, working for different organizations. But yes, that's my journey. I love it. There's no greater honor than to teach teachers. I was the 1990 College Teacher of the Year for the state of Ohio. Great honor, but you know what? My greatest honor is to be able to serve the teachers to help them with their daily tasks. I think I'm just living the life because it's been a wonderful journey for me, and now I can give back, and it's just been so meaningful.
Tim, one of the things that comes to my mind is in the research at the National Dropout Prevention Center over the years, we've identified 21 risk factor categories that are highly correlated with non-school completion.
Yeah.
And out of those 21, over half reside not in the schoolhouse, but
That's
in the
right.
community or in the home.
That's correct.
And historically, we as school people have been somewhat frustrated and with our inability to get outside the schoolhouse.
Yet if you notice the legislation that's coming through and all the things that are coming, they're asking the school to do more and more social science, more and more being dumped on the schools to literally take up those issues. And so there you have, with minimum to unfunded, another unfunded mandate. I mean, come on, where does that give? What has to happen there? So, we've already talked about the adverse childhood effects. I wanted to stress the word omission because some of the kids, you think it's all this trauma. It's also what they don't have. All right? My wife and I used to say, give us a child who's abused and we can help them and make them feel whole. Give us a child who's neglected and made to feel worthless and doesn't have attachment issues and can't attach to people and relate to people. That's much more challenging than a child who has been abused, because you can teach them that you're okay and the person that did that to you is the person that's not okay. So consequently, I always stress omission when it comes to adverse childhood effects. It's not necessarily all the active trauma, it's what isn't done for a child, okay? This data we'll skip over, but it's just the kind of the Cincinnati, Ohio national stuff, but we looked at the different things about jail time and so forth, and it's and then I posed this question to the teachers. Okay, so what would you do if you had a group of kids in your classroom with a bag over their head? What would you do if the kids in your classroom were bleeding? what would you do if kids came in with earmuffs or headphones on? They probably do anyhow, cell phones. The point is that we have kids who are suffering from toxic stress, and they can't learn either because it's being totally blocked out, just like the sensors that we have listed there.
So how do teachers know?
Well, that's the point. We tried to share with them the actual information. And of course, there's 3 ways to deal with information. And this is my favorite slide because I found this ostrich. I thought that was kind of cool. But you can deny the fact that it exists and just go on your merry way and say that the students are getting dumber every year and I'm doing my thing and they just don't appreciate me. Well, hello. All right, what's that going to do? Or you can change, you can actually change the information and go through all sorts of rationalizations about why it's happening. But you need to really change yourself and say, hey, wait a minute, what's really happening? And how can I be part of the solution and not just blame? So we say to the teachers, hey, we don't want you to be counselors or therapists. You're a teacher. You chose that as a profession. And we don't want you to be a community activist. But we do want you to advocate for your kids. And we do want you to participate. And you can see here that, the social emotional literacy of teaching children to be responsible for their own acts is part of a curriculum that we need to embed, maybe not in every math class, maybe not in some of the other subject areas, but definitely in the whole curriculum so that we support social emotional literacy of children who have to take responsibility for their actions. And that's what restorative practices underscores, that we're not going to punish you, we're going to make you realize that you were irresponsible, and we're going to show you the outcomes of that act so that you can become a more adult, or at least more mature, in your dealing with emotions, okay? So that was the whole concept there of what our expectations are for teachers. Okay, so we launched into really finding some great resources for developing a trauma-sensitive culture. And our team has this 17-page resource guide that we put together, which we can make available and link to this webinar later. But one of the greatest resources we found here was the whole Massachusetts advocacy project. And you can actually download that whole book right off of their website. And it's an incredible resource for you to create and advocate. And that's what we're trying to do right now, our trauma-sensitive school. I mean, we're not that far along, but we are on the journey, okay? We're not the experts. These people are the experts. And you'll see in the resource guide, the 17 pages, we did our homework, we found who were doing what, did telephone conferences with them, like the Fairfax, Virginia people and so forth. There is also a checklist, and of course changes in a checklist, but you'll notice those bulleted items there. And in that material that the Massachusetts group has organized, they have a simple 2-sided, 1-page checklist on where you are in terms of your trauma sensitivity and to develop policies and procedures and partnerships. So we're looking at that as kind of a formative assessment tool as we move forward.
Tim, it looks like those first 2 items, a school without any additional resources other than just the will to do it could make a difference.
Absolutely, Mark. It could happen, and it is happening. Although we would love to have additional resources.
Absolutely.
But yes, that's true. And the goals of the Massachusetts project became our goals in terms of the trauma-sensitive schools. I mean, what teacher wouldn't want their students to learn more and achieve more? What teachers wouldn't want to have fewer disruptions in their classroom and labs, okay? So these are obvious non-brainers, all right? I'm passing over some of the things about resilience because that's really not the focus of our webinar today. But it is amazing to me that some children in the same situation can not just survive, but thrive, and others crumble. And a lot of research is being done on this, along with the Devereaux resilience assessment tool. And we're really starting to study that and look at that, and the different models too about resilience and how you can teach life skills and so forth. We have a very strong program in the Cincinnati Public Schools called My Tomorrow, and that program does have a lot of life skills and career and college readiness materials. So we're real comfortable with having those kind of life skills within the curriculum already. So we feel that that'll be an important link. But as we move forward, we're hoping to look at restorative practice as opposed to punitive. When you looked at our discipline record and our baseline, we need to keep these kids in school. We need to make sure that they are responsible for their actions and help them to carry out kind of outcomes that would show that they care for the person they offended. Bullying, what outcome does that have? How does it make that other person feel? So we're looking at restorative practice as the strategy that we really would like to use. And these are all from materials that we do have in the guide that do help us take a look at, look, do you want your school to be punitive or do you want your school to be restorative and help restore a person's sense of responsibility to themselves and to their classmates and to their parents and to their community. So consequently, those kinds of things can be looked at. We are just learning and looking at that. Some schools that have done that in our area, Northwest Local Schools, sent their whole school district through the training for restorative practices. So we'll be visiting them and looking at how they're doing. They're right down the road from our Western Hills High School. So we're looking forward to partnering with them as they go through their journey. But I would like to conclude with Michael Fullen's work for your listeners and readers, because I feel that his research aligns with Joe Hendershot's 3 ethical leadership questions in his most recent book. And that's when I took the course from the Center from Hope for the Wounded, I was able to make some sense of all of this and help our team move forward. And I felt that Michael Fullen's work, Leading in a Culture Change, talks about these critical 5 key elements. Moral purpose, you know? You don't have to be Mother Teresa to have moral purpose. If you want to make your community better, and if you care about the kids in your school, that's the moral purpose, all right? I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be some highfalutin philosophical kind of thing. It's just that you want things to be better, and that's your moral purpose. Okay? One of my favorite Mother Teresa's quotes is, "Resolve to be tender with the young, compassionate with the old, sympathetic with the striving, tolerant of the weak and wrong, because sometime in your life you will have been all of these." If you're lucky to be all, right?
Yes.
And so, but the moral purpose that Fullen describes in his book, and it's a great read and study, okay, leads us then to looking at and truly understanding change. You know, it's not a game like we have to innovate the most. We have to be always changing. No, that causes martyrs. We don't want martyrs or heroes. We want people changing and creating cultures that support their work, all right? I always found it ironic that education is really, and learning basically, is a whole science of changing behavior. You know, one summer you could swim, the next you took lessons and you were able to swim. The summer before that, you couldn't swim, all right? So that was a change in your behavior, that you learned that. And here, educators, ironically, sometimes don't like to change, yet they're in the business of change. And of course, with all the things coming down from the state and federal government, they are asked to change time and time again. And you can see why the barrage might cause them to be a little gun shy, and I understand that. But the relationship building is key. And he talks about relationship building, and I'm talking about within the faculty. You know, I believe to listen to your greatest critic, because you'll learn more from them than your best friend. And if you sit down with them and really explore with them what the gripe is that they have, and you really learn to listen to that, you might really learn yourself and even change your approach. I think that sometimes we discount people who don't agree with us, and we put them off to the side and name call them and say, oh, they're laggards, or they're losers. Well, you know, they are teachers and educators just like you, and they have valid points about how to do things and how not to do things. So let's honor them by listening to them. So relationship building is critical. Fullen talks about all knowledge is social. Information isn't, but all knowledge is social. So if we share through relationships in the change process, as we work on our moral purpose together, what will happen? We will eventually cause what I call coherence making. And that's what I think has always been one of my gifts. I read things that nobody else wants to read, all right? Theories, books like this, and I try to make sense out of this, to make practical applications so that it can assist people to achieve their goals or to help them with their daily work. And coherence making is looking for patterns and trying to make this puzzle piece thing that we try to do stick together and make sense. And so he talks about coherence making. And those 5 key elements, if you as a leader in your school, whether you're on the faculty, whether you're in charge of the building engineering thing, or whether you're on the instructional leadership team, or whether you're the building principal, you might want to reflect on these 5 key elements. Which goes back to then the ethical leadership issues in Joe Hendershot's most recent book. And he questions, you know, what are you trying to change? Who are you trying to change? And why are we trying to change? Because if you don't have your act together, how dare you try to do anything else? So consequently, self-management is essential. You have to really, and that goes back to moral purpose with the Fullen material, you know. If you don't know why you're really doing this and what you really want as outcomes and who you really need to help and be helped with, collaborate with to achieve the, in this case, the trauma-sensitive culture within a school, then you better stop and have a personal retreat or back up and reflect a little bit more before you move forward. Get your act together before you're expecting other people to do so, all right? And so consequently, the remaining slides just ask in depth then what it is that we're trying to do. And as you can see, we're trying to create a safe, supportive learning environment, which then is a trauma-sensitive culture. We are also trying to, as you can see, you know, again, look at the community of learners. None of us is as smart as all of us. And the community of learners approach is critical to the understanding of relationship building, as well as understanding the change process and creating social knowledge together. And so the community of learners approach, I feel, is the only way to go when you're trying to develop a trauma-sensitive culture. And then, of course, you know, why are we trying to change the actual, to achieve? And that goes back to the Massachusetts Advocacy Program and the greatest thing, better achievement academically, more class time spent on teaching and less on behavioral issues, reduced discipline issues in the school, and the whole thing about improving an attitude. So that's what we're trying to do. It's a journey. We're certainly not there yet. I'd hope in 3 to 5 years we could come back to a conference like this and say, look at our discipline. Look at how incredibly low our incidents are. Look how high our students, or better our students, are achieving in state tests and so forth. But right now we are on a journey. And Portia Nelson's poem, Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters, I think illustrates the journey beautifully. And as she says, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk, I fall in, I'm lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes a long time to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street, there's a deep hole inside, I pretend I don't see it, I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. Still takes a long time to get out. Notice the responsibility issue. It isn't my fault. It isn't my fault. Chapter 3, though, what happens? I walk down that same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it's there. Oh, I still fall in. It's a habit. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. Oh, I walk around it. Chapter 5, and this is what we hope, is walking down a different street. We're walking down a different street for our children, with our children, developing a trauma-sensitive culture with our community, with our parents, with our faculty, essentially, and our staff, our community resource officers, so that we can all walk down a different street and all be on the way to a healthier and more productive school environment. And that's our goal. So I end with the call to action, as we say, and we look at Joe's work, Dr. Hendershot's work, and we look at continuing our research and continue to explore. Learning never ends, and we're hoping that on the journey, we can continue to learn as well. And so that's our call to action. That's what we're about. And I'm so honored to be able to describe in a little way the work that Western Hills High School is exploring as our team and the faculty more and more are getting on board as we move towards developing a trauma-sensitive school in the Cincinnati Public School District.
Tim, thank you so much for sharing how you're going about creating a trauma-sensitive culture there.
Well, it's a team effort.
It
certainly,
it has to be, and your leadership of that team and your guidance is really clear to us, and I see how we can learn from this and how our viewers can benefit from it. On the webcast, you saw Tim's contact information. I'm sure it would be fine for them to email you or contact you.
Absolutely, and we will have also the link to the resource guide so that they can, it's called the Trauma Sensitive Report, okay? So that we have a list of all the different videos like the TED Talks and stuff, but also a lot of books, materials, and also restorative practices from practitioners and what school districts are doing what. So it's a 17-page resource that you can pick and choose through there and explore on your own, because it took us a long time to kind of go through all that data and make information out of it. And we believe that all knowledge is social, so we're trying to create that social knowledge out to the people who are listening to your solutions program.
Speaking of social, I hope the conversation will be able to continue. There's a discussion board at the bottom of our page.
Okay.
There's Twitter at NDPCN, and the hashtag is solutions. Look us up on Facebook, email Tim, email the center.
We would love to respond, put you in touch with Tim, viewers, but you guys together with people that are doing the same work and learn from each other. It's been a great Solutions broadcast. Solutions to the Dropout Crisis brought to you by K-12 and Fuel Education, our sponsors. We couldn't do it without them. And so we thank you for viewing. We hope that you'll continue to watch this. We hope that you will refer it to your colleagues and friends. This episode of Solutions is archived on our website under the Solutions section. And we know that a lot of people view it months later. These things live on. So Tim, thank you. Mark, thank you. Viewers, we hope you'll continue to tune in monthly or go back and look at the archived episodes of Solutions to the Dropout Crisis.